Hi, this is Mort from PC and VR, presenting a tutorial on optimized imports of mesh models from Blender to Unity. I will test three basic export methods: native blend, default FBX, and FBX with experimental apply transform, so you can see which is best and why. There are no complex assets to download. You can follow along to build the example asymmetric mesh or use your own. The two products I will use are Blender 2.7.9 and Unity 2017.2. The behavior and interface may vary slightly if you use different versions, but I have also tested Blender 2.7.8 and Unity 5.6.3, which behave the same. The best way I found to export Blender objects for Unity is not with the native blend file, which contains every object in the scene as well as the required mesh and/or rig, and not using a default FBX export, which has issues with rotation and scaling, but rather to perform a custom FBX export of selected objects using the experimental apply transform checkbox with forward axis as -Z forward and up axis as Y up. This is only an issue because asymmetric meshes need to handle an incompatibility between the right-hand coordinate system in products like Blender, Maya, 3D Studio, and OpenGL, and the left-hand coordinate system in Unity and DirectX Direct3D, where one axis will have positive values in the source exported object, but negative values in the target. Imported objects may also rotate and scale unpredictably, and game code designed around source axes can move the object incorrectly in the target environment. I'll step through creation and export of an asymmetric shape in Blender, then import in Unity, first with native blend file, then default FBX, and finally FBX with experimental apply transform. To ensure we can distinguish the correct orientation of the asymmetry without relying on UV texture mapping, we will extrude three distinct shapes on each of the positive X, Y, and Z axes. After opening Blender, we can see the default mesh cube and the red, green, blue axes of the right-hand XYZ coordinate system. If you haven't changed the default factory setup, Control-N or File, New should reload the default 1x1x1 cube. Otherwise, tab to Object Mode, A to select all, delete all objects in scene, and add Mesh Cube. Rotate the user perspective view for convenience to show the axis orientations with positive X left, positive Y right, and positive Z up. Right-click to select the cube, tab to Edit Mode, choose Face Select. All faces should currently be highlighted as selected. Space menu, subdivide mesh. This should result in 4 faces replacing each single face. A to deselect all. Right-click, select any subface on the positive X-axis. E1 enter to extrude face 1 unit. Right-click, select any subface on the positive Y-axis. E2 enter to extrude face 2 units. Right-click, select any subface on the positive Z-axis. E3 enter to extrude face 3 units. A to deselect all. Tab to Object Mode. Right-click, select Object Mesh. Save the blend file as whatever you like, for example rhcoord.blend. File, Export FBX. In the Export FBX options panel, check mark the Select Objects to limit the export to the object mesh. Leave the scale as 1. Forward set as -Z forward. Up with Y up. These axis settings are designed to match the target environment, not how the mesh appears in Blender. Forward refers to how the positive Y-axis in Blender will map to the target environment. Up refers to how the positive Z-axis in Blender will map to the target environment. Left-click Mesh, leaving others deselected. Now checkmark the experimental apply transform. Confirm the file name is OK. For example, right-hand coord X transform, FBX. At the top right of the screen, click Export FBX. File, Export FBX. Deselect the experimental apply transform. Change the file name to reflect no transform, for example, rhcoord notransform.fbx, and click Export FBX. Minimize Blender rather than closing, so you can swap windows after Unity import for easy comparison. Open Unity with a new empty 3D project. Name the project as whatever, for example, rhcoord. Set the coordinate system to global in the top controls menu. Assets, import new asset. Here we choose the 3 files to import, the blend file and the 2 FBX files. These 3 files should appear in the Assets window, each of which you can drag into the scene hierarchy where it will create a game object with default settings. Creating the game object from the blend file first, we can see in a default scene view, the mesh is rotated away from the expected orientation. This is because Unity shows the positive X, Y, and Z axes all facing the user, with Y up, X to the left, and Z to the right, whereas Blender's default user perspective view shows X forward, Y right, and Z up. And we rotated our example blend file user perspective view to show X left, Y right, and Z up. We can correct this by rotating the Unity scene view to show the axis orientation as -X left, positive Y up, and -Z right. For blend file imports, the mesh model appears in the same upright orientation as it does in Blender, with a few key differences. The x-axis is inverted, negative to positive. Game object transform rotation about the x-axis defaults to -90 to maintain the upright position seen in Blender. Unity scale is 2 times Blender unit scale. To confirm this, create a 1x1x1 3D object cube mesh game object near to the imported mesh for comparison, using Ortho View for measurement against the grid. Rather than manually adjusting game object XYZ scale values, the initial scale of imported assets can easily be corrected in the inspector view for each asset. Delete or deactivate the blend mesh game object. Drag the rhcoord notransform FBX file to the hierarchy to create a second new game object. We can see the FBX mesh game object appears with matching orientation, same inverted x-axis, and -90 x rotation. It appears to be 2 times Blender unit scale, however the XYZ scale has been set as 100, effectively making it 0.02 times Blender unit scale. Delete or deactivate that game object. Finally, drag the rhcoord xtransform FBX file to the hierarchy to create a third new game object. Again, the FBX mesh matches the same orientation in scene view as the imported blend file and FBX file, with the same inverted x-axis, same 2 times Blender unit scale. However, the x-axis rotation is now correctly set to 0 degrees. And aside from a once-off adjustment of the imported asset scale in the inspector, if necessary, there is nothing more we need to do with game objects in the scene, whether manually set or instantiated in-game. That concludes this tutorial. We can take the following points in summary. Blender's FBX export of selected objects only with experimental apply transform along -Z forward, Y up axes is the best way to get just the mesh objects you need from any given Blender scene into a format most easily imported by Unity with minimal work required to correct the orientation, scale, and mesh inclusion exclusion. And that's it. So thanks for watching.